Hey, is that Dominique sitting there? I'm
I
on
was
the
trying to
team.
figure it out. The room looks empty.
I was trying to see if they're still doing the 10 to 11. Because that's the slideshow for the 11 to 12.
They put the time wrong. It was Janine was supposed to be from 10 to 11, and I don't know how it got mixed up. I saw it on the email yesterday and pointed it out to them, and they said they corrected it.
Okay. All right. Perfect.
So yeah, Janine's doing the 10 to 11. That's what I was waiting for, but I don't see anybody there.
No.
Actually, in the audience.
I know there's an accident, it sounds like on 76, because I have one prospective agent who's stuck in traffic waiting for it and was texting me, is like, can you send me the Zoom link? Looks like there's about 7 people on this Zoom.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
So I am kind of sandwiching this in between the Zoom call and an 11 o'clock closing, so if it's okay, are we up and running?
You're up and running, all you gotta do to move the PowerPoint is just hit these arrow keys.
Very good, that's probably above my technology level. I will do my best.
Good morning, Janine.
Good morning. Up and down.
Alright, so now you should be able to hit back, go back and forward to go forward.
Perfect. So, I was a little hesitant on this content when Jen Nelson had brought it up. It's very difficult for me to kind of do do's and don'ts without sounding like I'm complaining about agents and TCs and I'm gonna take this from a very practical, general title approach. So it should transfer and not be go exclusive, but it should transfer with any title company, anyone, whether you're a buyer's agent, seller's agent, or a TC within the KW community. And it should kind of translate to any other title companies as well. So we're going to start with the do's. I'll start with the good. I'm going to say that documentation is probably the most essential part of any transaction to keep the transaction going smoothly between the real estate side and the title side. Agreements of sale, knowing client names, buyers, sellers, reaching out to listing agents if you're a buyer's agent, if names don't match up, if you see that someone signed it and that's not the seller that you put on there, reach out and find out who is the actual registered owner, especially in the city of Philadelphia. The indexing, terrible. What's on a prior deed does not necessarily mean that it's going to attach to either the assessor's page or the revenue page. So what you're pulling up when you do a contract may be prior owner information, it may not be current owner information. So when you get them back, just double check. Ask your clients how do they want to take title? Mortgage companies right now are very big on including full middle names if they're on their driver's license. But the fact of the matter is that buyers can take title using any variation of their name that comes up on their title report. So if it's an ancillary name on their title report and they only want to use a middle initial versus a full middle name, they have the right to go to the title company, to the lender, and say that. We initially will put out title based on what comes in on the contract. So legal names are also super important contractually. If you are dealing with Joe Smith, please look at his license and make sure, is his legal name really Joe or is his legal name Joseph? Does he want to use a middle initial for title and deed? Does he sign with his middle initial? If so, put it on the contract so title and lenders get that right off the bat. It helps alleviate a lot of last minute changes. For us, it means changes to deeds that have already potentially been signed if they did a deed package. So knowing kind of the things that you can acquire up front before going to an executed AOS and how that translates to title and lender.
Janine, this this is a great point. I've had several situations where I've got a listing contract sold, I run the public records and the name doesn't match up. I've had to ask to see the driver's license. I've had sellers tell me, oh, I got divorced and changed my name. And I'm like, well, I need the legal papers that show you changed your name.
Yep. I get contracts, buyers and sellers alike, and I'll look at to see who executed, and it's not anyone, and they'll go, oh yeah, well, he has a POA. Well, if nobody knows that there's a power of attorney, and that makes a huge difference on the title side. If
Yeah.
the buyer using a POA, are they gonna be using a POA to sign a mortgage? If it's a seller, are they gonna be using the POA to sign the deed? Both of those POAs have to be recorded because they're recordable documents that they be executing for closing. And POAs have to be very specific. What powers of attorney, there are current powers of attorney that you can use for real estate purposes that are not recordable on the title side. So sometimes new powers of attorneys would need to be drafted in order for recordable documents to be executed using those powers of attorney. Certain language has to be on there. But if you know someone is going to be signing a contract using a POA, use the person by their attorney in fact, and the person who's actually going to be signing it. I think and I went over this with new agent orientation, but know the things that will make your contract potentially voidable. What is the best way for you to represent your client, knowing that you will have an agreement of sale that will or at least that you can defend in the event something happens, and making some of those errors where someone signed it other than the person that is actually listed as the buyer or seller potentially can create a situation where you can't defend it because the person that's actually contractually obligated is not the person that acknowledged those obligations in the agreement, if that makes sense. Does anyone need any new explanation on that? Does it make sense?
No, it totally made sense. That was great. And one thing I've noticed recently on I'm dealing with a lot of listings lately is that also when I pull the public records, sometimes it's not my person's name. When I ask them about it, they're like, no, I bought it. I've had to ask to see their Alta or their HUD from when they purchased the home, their closing statement.
So there's two parts to the recording process when someone buys a home. The one, they record the mortgage. But there's a difference between recording the mortgage and the date that it recorded and the date that it actually becomes public record, which we call an index date or a cover date. So there's always generally about a 3-week delay between something recording and it actually being affirmed, available online, and being part of public record, and that's indexing. City of Philadelphia is terrible. You might find that current owner is actually on the OPA site, but prior owner is still on revenue site. None of the departments talk to each other. So if you notice a discrepancy, like I said, if you're on the buy side, confirm it with the listing agent. Who is your client? And if you are on the sell side, confirm with your client that they actually are the registered owner of the property. Whether that be, every owner gets the original deed in the mail along with their final title policy if they got a policy. They should have documentation that proves their ownership. And I would not take a PGW bill because they could be a tenant at a property and you can put PGW in a tenant's name. It doesn't have to be the registered owner. Water and taxes, you cannot. But the city of Philadelphia, there is still a very large delay. I came in during COVID, so I don't have any city of Philadelphia experience pre-COVID and things shutting down and backing up. They're still backed up. They're still making mistakes. It's still pretty much a crap show. But
Oh yeah, even on the city certs, I've had my last 3 city certs have come back with previous owner's name.
Yep.
And just I have found that when I do the listing contract, asking for those documents up front has saved my butt a few times.
And
because
I will tell you, as far as city certs, and title's not concerned with who's on it. We're concerned with the date and the dates of the violations. if there are any violations on there. But if L&I, regardless of who they say is currently the registered owner, if they're saying that that property is, you know, violation free, permit open free, and, you know, zoned properly, that's really all we need from a title perspective. So going on to additional documentation, making sure that any lender involved in a transaction as well as title gets copies of all CTAs that are drawn. If there's contractual changes, if you're adding a second buyer, if it's very important that we kind of get them in real time when they're executed so that we can make the necessary changes. It's embarrassing for me when I send out preliminaries and, you know, I come to find out, oh, well, they added seller assist. Oh, well, the price changed to this. If it's not in my system and we didn't get it, it didn't happen. It's like that old real estate saying, if you don't have it in writing, it never happened. And it's the same thing. If I don't have what I need to make the changes to the transaction, for me, it never actually happened. So when you get things executed by all sides, just forward them. I would much rather have too much than too little. I'd rather you send me everything and let me weed out what I need and don't need versus, you know, having to chase people for documentation that's absolutely relevant or creates a situation where I can't balance with a lender because I don't have the necessary documentation to actually support making the change. So just make sure that title and lender get all of those contractual changes after the agreement is drafted. Recently also, I'm just going to touch on EMD checks. I have not read for a very long time since it was 4 pages instead of about 11 pages, the Pennsylvania real estate contract or car contract. It's been about 15 years since I've sold in Pennsylvania, but I have read and know the paragraphs that really pertain title-wise. EMDs, if there is no change to that contract, traditionally it defaults that a listing agent's broker is going to hold the escrow funds. I would prefer, if you know someone's going to make it to go abstract, that the contract be drawn that way. But if it's not, also fine. Our underwriters require that any amounts over $1,000, and honestly, my preference is any amounts at all, be in the form of either cashier's checks or wired funds. For a couple of different reasons. If those funds don't clear and I take a personal check, there's sometimes I might not know that it didn't clear, and we might go ahead and disperse a file and come to turn out we don't actually have that $2,000 or $3,000 deposit. Lenders also source that money, and by getting certified checks or wires, it ends up on their bank statements basically in real time because it's an automatic withdrawal. Personal checks, it could take up to a week before it clears, and it just extends them being able to source it. So cashier's checks and wired funds are generally the rule of thumb. For us, will we make exceptions based on, you know, a case-by-case basis? We will, but anything pretty much closing within the next 2 weeks, we really cannot make that exception because of the fact that we could end up being the one holding the bag. Once something closes, it is incredibly difficult to get money from people. Nobody likes to chase anybody for cash. And that's exactly what we end up having to do. So as a rule of thumb, all earnest money deposit checks should be cashier's check or wire made payable to go abstract. And again, if you know that you'd like us to be the holder, or a listing agent does not hold escrow, then just go ahead and draft the contract that way. If anything ever did happen, yes, who actually has possession of that money should actually be in the contract itself. We went over my needs don't match. So special circumstances. We all, especially lately during COVID, have clients who are not going to be attending. We have sellers who are out of state, a lot of times lately out of country. Knowing these types of details and special arrangements that are going to have to be made surrounding a transaction on the front end is much more efficient. I just had a closing last week that 2 days before we found out that one of the sellers was in Taiwan. She was 80 years old. She does not use computers. She does not have a phone. She does not speak English. And the agent, well, we're just going to do Iran. Well, that's amazing. We can absolutely do Iran. However, she needed to be able to authenticate her identity in order to do that. And she could not answer any questions regarding her credit report. So it took almost 5 business days to finally get her authenticated to be able to do the actual remote online notary. Yeah. So remote online notary. So when notarization is happening, basically online, it's usually during Zoom calls, where there will be a notary on the other end, but it is digitally signed by both parties signing the document as well as the notary itself. It will become much more popular in probably a short period of time. It was kind of, I think it was always there, but became more prevalent in the very early parts of COVID, when, you know, meeting and closing in person was not an option. Right now, there are very strict requirements in being able to use Iran. If you have a lender that is out of the country, and anyone in the United States, and anyone even out of the country, you have the option to go to an embassy or a consulate for notary services. You do have to make an appointment, and sometimes those appointments can be very long and not convenient to the timeline of a transaction. So RONs can be done. They have to be under certain, for us, it has to go through our registered RON system, which is notarized. So we have to actually facilitate the signing. If someone's going to be using it on a mortgage, lenders have to agree to it. They have to agree to change their closing instructions to specifically state that they understand that these mortgage documents will be executed using RON. So there is a process. So knowing if you have someone who is already or will be at the time of closing out of the area, those details on the front end can help smooth things along. Really any information regarding a contract, especially if you know information specifically about the closing itself that might be out of the ordinary, pick up the phone and give me a call. You know what I mean? It's a lot easier when you have a heads up versus, you know, the day before and finding out that you have to jump through a lot of hoops. For out-of-state buyers with mortgage packages using remote notaries or outside closing services, depending on their time zone, early morning signings are always best. In order for me to close and disperse, I have to have 2 things: a reportable mortgage and a reportable deed. If someone is signing documents in Ohio, I don't have a reportable mortgage. I can't see what they've signed. I don't know that it's been executed correctly. So that whoever is the remote notary has to scan those documents. That can sometimes take hours, depending on travel time back to an office or whether they have a signing right after that. It's not an immediate process. So for signings that don't happen in the AM, it is very difficult to be able to close and disperse. Lenders who require funding approval, that's just going to add time onto that schedule. And I have a very finite cutoff for being able to send wires, for being able to send payoffs. You know, it's not an infinite that I can keep doing it throughout the night. Banking does shut itself off, as well as the Federal Reserve. So when you know that there's special circumstances, let's talk about it early so that we can make those arrangements. Same thing, power of attorney, needs for deed packages. The front end is always the easiest way to streamline the transaction. We all understand people change their minds. Clients sometimes can be a little nutty. Where you might ask them one time and the answer is different when you ask them a week and a half later, and we understand, it's all good. I try and have my conveyancers have those packages prepared and at least created as PDFs, so if we do get that request, they can go out immediately. And they are supposed to be asking when the commitment goes out, whether or not sellers will be attending or requiring a package. If you have transactions where that is not happening, I would love for you to just come and let me know so that I can reiterate the process with the girls in my office. Because that should be a standard question every time the commitment goes out. Schedule early. Schedule has been the bane of my existence lately. I don't know too many of the other title companies in the general center city area and how big or small they might be, how well staffed, or, you know, if they had let go a lot of their employees because of the slowdown last year. For us, the schedule fills up quick. When you do submit an order, I would try and get a general time frame. If it is on my schedule, you know that you have, you know, a spot in concrete, if it's ready and, you know, able to go on that specific day. We can always take it off and reschedule, but sometimes waiting until the last minute, it is very hard to put something on last minute when I already have 4 back-to-backs and would need to call in a second closer and rely on them being available to be able to accommodate the request. So just schedule them, you know, when you get them in, say, hey, we'd like to put it on the schedule for this time on this day. If it doesn't contractually happen, like I said, we can always push it. But at least you have a spot in a location that is preferred on the front end versus then, you know, having to make accommodations or squeeze people in. I always like to be able to give every transaction and a closing, you know, the time that it deserves and my attention to the clients that attend as well as their clients. And sometimes if I'm squeezing in a 5th or a 6th closing, where I like to keep 2 hours allotted to one, I'm now down to an hour. So it ends up kind of being like the, you know, the Rossetti closing. And I prefer to be able to give everyone the time to deserve. I think every buyer and seller should have a really good closing experience, an experience whether they decide to come or not. I think that the process should be friendly, informative. I just think I don't want anyone ever leaving and go transaction and saying that was the worst experience of my life. It should be relatively seamless. And if there are things that come up on title where it can't be seamless, sometimes the clients just don't even need to know. That's something between the agents and title. 99.9% of things that come up on title are fixable. It's only a very rare, probably 0.1%, where things need to terminate because of a title issue. And it could be because it's a title issue that can't be fixed. It could be a title issue that buyers and sellers are not willing to wait for to rectify in order to close. But it is a very small percentage that can't be fixed in time for closing, as long as we're all on the same page and can discuss the options and come up with the best options that work the best for all parties involved in a transaction.
Janine, are
Yeah.
there days that are better for you for a title company to do a closing, like Tuesday through Thursday, or like
So
Fridays
I'm
and
gonna let
Mondays
you
the
know
craziest?
that
What do you prefer?
Historically, month to month, the busiest contractually. Now, I mean, we put everything, our process, we get a contract. It has a proposed close date. We put that contract and we let them hover at 6 a.m. because we don't have a time of day that's preferred by the clients. We don't have a location yet preferred by the agents. So it goes onto our calendar at 6 o'clock. Tracy is supposed to every 2 weeks, well, she does it every day, but she works 2 weeks out. So say right now, she's now looking at things starting on the 24th or 23rd, the week of that week. And she should be making phone calls and sending emails to clients. Hey, are you ready to schedule this? When these are our time availabilities and so forth. Contractually, the busiest day of closing is Friday. People want to close on Friday because they have, sometimes they have packed trucks. They don't have to take the additional time off from work. They can leave a closing and start moving in. And then they have the entire weekend to be able to try and finish it up before they go back to their normal life. Middle of the month, the 15th of the month is also generally contractually a very heavy close day. March, I'm gonna let you know, pretty much from the 20th of March through the 31st of March, we had at least 4 to 5 closings a day, almost every single day for those last 2 weeks of the month. Right now, we also are in a big lender crunch, appraisal issues, things having to go back into underwriting for certain things. You know, if you get commitments that have requirements, make sure that your clients know that they need to submit those documentations in order to get the clear to close. We only know it's clear or not clear because we request CDs usually about a week in advance. Sometimes we don't get a response from the lender if it's not clear. Sometimes we do. But that's the only thing. The lender is not going to come to us if the borrower still has outstanding items that are needed, or it had to go into, you know, maybe they had to order a new appraisal, or you contested an appraisal. But right now, things are getting pushed on the one lender end more often than they are on the client end. So when I might have had 30 things scheduled from the 20th to the 31st, only about 22 of them actually closed. And out of those 22, probably only 10 of them closed on the original day that they were supposed to. Everything right now is a scramble, and I get it, like I totally understand it, but it also makes it that much important to get it on our schedule with a time and location as early as you possibly can. Even if you're having that conversation when you're drafting the agreement of sale, what works best for you on this day? I'm assuming that you're asking them, what's a good day for you to be able to close? You know, most contracts, it's the last day or the last Friday of a month. And that's great. Just know that we probably will not be able to accommodate everybody. I do have ancillary, you know, a second closer to be able to come in. We'll probably end up not later, but sooner, have to hire even someone, even if it's just part-time. Just because things are, I think we thought that the lull was gonna last a little bit longer than it did. And thankfully for everybody, it did not last that long. And it looks like we're gonna have a relatively normal spring boost in production, at least based on our numbers and from what I understand on the PW side's numbers. But whenever it is, if we have it on the calendar, we can remedy it. You know what I mean? We can work it out as long as I know, you know, in advance. Like I said, I need to rely on other people's availability to bring them in for reinforcements on those heavy days. So I think just being proactive in all aspects of the transaction is probably the best way to keep it running smooth. And that's really the goal of today, is how to keep it running smoothly. Because we all get stressed out. Things just compound and busy schedules. And right now, I'm sure showings are crazy on top of closings being crazy on top of, I understand title companies, outside title companies are no longer, you know, doing some of the more standard things that they used to do because we will not put out the additional cost up front. So things are a little nutty right now. And I think we all just have to figure out the best ways to be able to acclimate to what might be a new normal in the industry. And just know that I'm always here as a resource, whether you have a transaction that's with Go or with, you know, Trident or any of the other closing services around in the, you know, in the counties or Pennsylvania, New Jersey, wherever it is, that I'm a resource for you. Give me a call if you have something going on with another title company. I can at least give you the perspective of, you know, someone on the title side. And it doesn't necessarily, you know, title's relatively standard across the board. So it's not really a Go perspective as it is so much an industry perspective. Freeland, Altus, and HUDs. I sometimes get requests for prelims 3 weeks before a closing. Like, I just got one yesterday. It was literally 2 days after the commitment was released. The rule of thumb, preliminary, yes. So a preliminary Alta settlement statement or a preliminary HUD-1 if something is not a TRID type loan or like a conventional type loan.
Okay.
So I can't do. I cannot release a preliminary that early. For one, I don't have enough conveyancing in if the commitments were just released. People are still trying to get us the conveyancing docs. I don't honestly have lender numbers if you're on the buyer side. I don't have payoffs. I don't have 3407s if the seller is in a condominium association or a homeowners association. Our rule of thumb is you should get a preliminary no later than 48 hours. We try and do at least 72, and on most cash, I usually try and get them out a week early. But a week is probably going to be the earliest that you're going to get a preliminary, and most of the time, I don't like sending them on the buyer side because when I first started, I had too many buyers come in who only brought funds based on the preliminary, never got final numbers, and they were thousands and thousands of dollars short. So if you get a preliminary, I do send it to all, and it will specifically say prelim, no lender fees. I specifically will also say in an email that they are not final, that these figures are still subject to change because I'm not balanced with a lender, or I'm still waiting on a piece of conveyancing. And I generally will put out a request if I am missing things. It makes it important to be able to send in any fees that you have, predominantly fee sheets on both sides, send them with the contract. You know, most TCs should be getting the compensation agreements associated with the agreement. If not, most of the agents, when they submit them, if they're putting them into command, the compensation should be in there. But send them over. We have to send a very, I'll call it a preliminary to lenders when our title goes out so that they can disclose the fees. If I send it and it doesn't have a broker fee on it, and then later on, when we go to balance, it has a broker fee on it because it wasn't disclosed. A lot of time they have to create cures because something is now out. And I don't have any lenders in the room, but they have to create lender credits and ways to be able to cure the difference between their estimated CD and the CD that's now going to be final. So get them in early. Like I said, I prefer to get them when we have the contract of sale, so that we can get them on there early. Obviously, they're going to be subject to change. Then you might be adding assist on 3 weeks later after doing home inspections or whatever. But at least the broker fee and the base commission that you are expecting to receive in the transaction, it would be great if they could come over on the front end versus the back end. It helps streamline and it helps the lenders as well.
There's almost like, there's no limit to the amount of documents I can send in the beginning, right? Like any possible piece of information.
You want to stay on my good side? Do you want
But
to?
maybe I don't.
So, no, and like I said before, I'd rather have too much.
Okay.
One thing, and this part is Go specific. I tend to get a lot of emails where I am the only Go person on that email, and a lot of it is, can you send wire instructions to my client? Here's my fee sheet, here's this. I'm not the only person that works at Go Abstract. Our concierge sends out order confirmations. Everybody associated with a contract should get that order confirmation, and it will list who your conveyancer is with the company. I can tell you off the bat that if you have a file that has the letters FM in it, right now your conveyancer will be Meredith Fitzpatrick. And if you have a file number that has either a CA or a CO in it, your conveyancer is Tara Clymer. That's the only two people really that you need outside of me. If you have an issue with anyone in my office, feel free to send me an independent email or attach me to emails that are that have them on them so that I know that something is going on. My phone is always available. I mean, my cell is 24/7. You call me at 9:30 at night, I'm going to pick up the phone. call me at 6 o'clock in the morning, guess what? I'm awake working and I'm gonna pick up the phone. So just keep me in the loop. I can't fix problems that I don't know. So knowing them is the first step in me being able to figure out a solution for you. I don't want anyone, again, having a bad experience with Go Abstract. The goal is to keep it running smoothly and for everyone, to be happy that they did business with us. And that's agents, TCs, your clients, that's everybody. And if it's not going that way, then please let me know that. Yes.
Speaking of conveyancing also, I'm sure that people who have known this for a while know the newer agents. And probably easier on your end too, I come to find that since we've been using the conveyancing form, the templated version, it's definitely a lot easier to submit that to you guys as well as if you give us the prelim, hold the numbers.
So, and I love that. I know that Take Me to Closing is also using a conveyancing form, and I love it because, there's certain things that we need off the bat. We need clients' social security numbers because we have to run domestic relations searches on every individual involved in a transaction. That's to make sure that they do not have any Pennsylvania child support orders that are in arrears. And there's just certain things, the lenders ask us for certain things, so you can certainly send over whatever conveyancing form. We don't usually get them. We've been getting them from Take Me to Closing lately because of the social security bit. But I think that it's send them over, we just upload it. It stays in a secure portal. It goes absolutely nowhere. And as far as socials, if your clients have any issues providing them information, they can always call our office and give it to us verbally. So it's not done in an electronic format that might be hackable. I understand, and we want to be able to comply with everyone's safety and security when it comes to, any type of money fraud. So, but it is something that is necessary. And I think conveyancing forms are fantastic. I really do. And they should be designed. I know that you work both sides of the bridge. I don't know if the other conveyancers are also working both sides of the bridge, but it should be designed to be both sides. Real estate, honestly, when I came to going from New Jersey to predominantly Philadelphia transactions, and I've said it before, it's like going from living on Earth to moving and having to acclimate to Mars within a day. It is, the real estate is maybe not contractually so different, but the way things are done in Pennsylvania is very different than the way it is done in New Jersey. And for me, New Jersey is kind of my comfort zone. I think that I've done a pretty good job learning Philadelphia as well as Pennsylvania. But New Jersey to me is just it's much easier to do real estate. And it's just, you don't have to fight for tax figures. You don't have to, not everything costs something. In Pennsylvania, you have to pay something in order to get anything. And it takes time. You know what I mean? It takes time.
A conveyancing form, when I send Go Abstract a contract, are you gonna send me that conveyancing form, or are you gonna find a conveyancing form and send it?
No, so usually what you're gonna do, Davis, is you're going to be using one of the TC groups to actually conveyance your transaction, whether it's a buyer transaction or a seller transaction. So what you're gonna decide is who you're going to use. And then you're gonna provide them that contract, and then generally we can be on that email that they will provide all of the ancillary documentation from that point forward.
Got it.
So the agents, you want to make sure that your TCs have everything.
Right.
You can always put me on those emails and I'll upload them and change our system. Whether that's a price change, adding an assist, whatever it is, you're adding a second buyer. I'll let you know what additional information, because again, we need socials on new buyers. We need to run. You're adding, someone's changing from, purchasing individually and now they want to put it into a trust or an LLC. That's going to come with a lot of not only contractual changes, but additional information and documentation that we're going to need for those new formed entities. So, yeah.
You think, don't you think if I steer my client to your telephone,
Huh?
and you, I posted in New Jersey, I was, broker in New Jersey, broker in Pennsylvania. But if I steer the customer to your company, it's creating more liability for me as an agent. If I let them.
Why would that be?
If I let the lawyer pick it, with his client, really, suppose a mistake or something, and the broker. Refer, they blame the broker for taking your title, is referred by the broker.
So
It's been
affiliated
going on.
businesses are not supposed to be any type of a coerced situation.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is, there's probably only about 5% of our transactions, both on the PA side and the New Jersey side, that have attorneys involved. Most buyers and sellers in this general area of real estate on both sides of the bridge, they do those transactions relying on the real estate experience of a real estate agent and not generally of counsel. So I think that, yes, should people have options? They absolutely should have options. Should you get them if you are sending it to sign affiliated business agreements? Absolutely, you should get them to sign those affiliated business agreements. This is not a you have to do this type situation. Everyone has choices. We are not, we are not into forcing anyone to use services, and I've had a lot of instances where, I'll give you an example. A young guy was buying a condominium in the city. Spoke to his agent. He's the only person on the contract. We had this contract for about 6 weeks. We were a week away from closing, and dad decides that he wants to now be involved in his son's transaction and provide him all the guidance that he possibly can guide him, including we had no right to order title on his behalf because his best friend owns a title company. Now, we have spent thousands of dollars conveyancing, ordering all of our search costs and so forth. And we did let them take that transaction. And we did bill him out for our out-of-pocket expenses. And we may or may not have actually gotten that money. So by not talking to your clients and verifying that you are acting on their behalf in the way that they want you to act, like I said, everyone should be explained the situation. They should not be felt that they are forced to do anything. But we are very happy to work with KW. We're not solely owned by KW, but we are very happy to, to be able to do this with you. But your clients ultimately, you're right, have the option to be able to make their own choices. I am.
And what other states, Delaware?
No, we right now are only licensed in Pennsylvania and New Jersey. And I'm personally licensed in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and a notary in both of those states as well. So let's go on to the quick notes. This is where it gets a little sketchy for me because, like I said, I don't want anyone to feel like I'm complaining. This is really about just keeping transactions smooth. And we've already probably touched on a lot of this during the dues as well. Who's the client in the transaction? Just verifying that, when we get those contracts, that names, the parties, ask people, if it's a single person, do you plan on bringing someone else on? Is there someone that's going to be living with you that you're going to want to put on the title? Because then they're getting a mortgage. Sometimes that makes a big difference. Needs for last minute add-ons. Being proactive throughout the course of a transaction to try and eliminate some of those last minute fires, specifically around scheduling and the locations of where people are located. A lot of that can be handled and discussed, and a good solid plan for settlement done on the front end versus the back end. Making promises to clients without checking the title first. This tends to be a big one because I get a lot of, well, they're your clients too, and you have to be able to do this. And I would like to just start off, and I know for new agents, you've heard this before. Title does not represent buyers and sellers. We have no fiduciary responsibility to the buyers and sellers of transactions. We honestly do not have a fiduciary responsibility to the agents referring the business either. Our sole purpose is to represent an underwriter who is issuing a final title policy to the buyer of a property or to the lender in a refinance. That is our sole responsibility. In doing that, we take on the responsibility of facilitating the closing, but we do not have a contractual or have, no clients have ever signed anything with us to use our services. No agents have never signed anything with us to use our services. There is no contractual or fiduciary responsibility between title, realtors, buyers and sellers. We represent an underwriter who is issuing the final policy. That is who, we are their agent, they are our client. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's interesting that they don't explain, you know.
Pick an underwriter?
No, like the underwriters and pick the title company, even though the title company represents the underwriter's interests.
So the underwriter actually, so underwriters are just that, just like you might have underwriters for homeowners insurance, where you might have a broker being maybe Goosehead, but you're getting insurance underwritten by travelers or farmers, you know what I mean? So you have a broker and then you have an underwriter. Same thing in medical insurance. There's underwriters for the policies, and then there's the brokers who issues those policies. No different in the title. We are a broker that issues title policies for, and we use 3 different underwriters. But that is where our responsibility lies. Our responsibility is to be able to issue a title has the least amount of risk in a future claim post-closing. And that's like a hard stop. That's that's exactly what we do. And in doing that, like I said, we facilitate a closing. So for someone to make a promise to a client, like, oh, we can definitely close tomorrow at 3 o'clock. I've had agents send their people to me when they knew 3 hours before the lender's not ready. They're not going to be ready. Just so title would have to be the one to break the bad news to their client to say, I'm sorry you made your way all the way over here, but unfortunately your lender is not ready and this closing will not be happening today. Who do you think they're going to be mad at? Me? I mean, I can only do so much, but if you have knowledge of something not happening, promising that if you show up, that title's going to be able to pull mortgage docs out of their rear end and be able to close this for them is an unrealistic expectation. So I think we all have to keep expectations of what is possible and not possible. I like to pull a lot of things out of my hat, but there's just certain things that aren't possible. So making promises without checking with title first it puts me in a bad spot, because it's very difficult to relay that information back to one of your clients without it sounding like, I don't want anyone to feel like someone didn't do their job. But, you know, I have to be able to let them know the reality of the situation. So I think keeping the expectations of what anyone can do, and all of this works in reverse as far as our expectations for agents. You know, I would always come back and check to make sure that something's possible before I promised a lender that your client would be able to comply. You know what I mean? And then the last one is, you know, when problems arise, being able to talk about the situation and come up with viable solutions for any title related issue, transaction related issue. I think that the best way to do that is to be able to do it with a pragmatic level head. And, you know, like I said, everything is possible as long as everyone's willing to listen to the possibilities and the options and figuring out which of those options work. And again, if anyone ever isn't getting the response that they need from me or anyone else in my office, please reach out. I always want everyone to have the questions, you know, the answers to their questions and not be, you know, kind of held for long periods of time without getting answers. I'm not gonna lie, sometimes nights and weekends are my best time to reach me on my cell, especially right now in a changing kind of environment in the office where I am closing rooms more than I'm in front of my email. Response times via email from me are going to be longer. I just literally this morning got my email down. Last Friday night, I left with 272 unread emails from the week. Every night I had gone and cleared at least 100, and I had to give myself a cutoff time. I was in the office every single night until almost 11 o'clock and back in the office by 8:30 in the morning to do it all over again. And this morning I got it down to 22, 22 emails that I have read, but needed me to action something and be in the office, whether it be cut a check or whatever, I had to physically be in the office to do. So just so you know, sometimes response times when you're sending me something via email may be longer. And if it's something that's really pressing, even if you don't think if it's pressing to you, it's pressing to me, give me a call. If I don't answer my cell, the next time I get to my desk, I will return the missed call. I always do, or text for that matter. So just, get in touch with me. And, John Paul, I just realized that this whole time I did not skip one slide. We've been stuck on the cover slide the entire time. I told you that it was above my technology knowledge.
Janine, this was so helpful. I really appreciate your help today. It opened up some eyes on some things. Yeah, I found it very informative. We'd love to have you back for another one down the line.
Let me know the content. I'd be more than happy to put it. This is probably, I know I've also said this with the new agents. It is one of the best parts of my job. One of the things that I enjoy the most. I could talk real estate, both sides, on the real estate side and the title side all day, every day. I think it's just a fascinating industry to be in that is constantly evolving, changing. There's a lot of good things that are happening, and like I said, I'm always happy to talk about it. And I thank you for inviting me. Does anyone have any quick questions? No? Well, let me know if you do. I appreciate it, everybody. Good luck. Bring me some transactions.
I'm working.
When you first started, and I'm probably still being developed and probably should. You were on the phone and had a rental one.
Yeah.
And it sounded like someone who potentially, I'm just making myself a policy. You had to like step in, you were standing in the bar, and speak. And I thought this guy is going to be amazing. You have a great amount of confidence. You speak with all of this knowledge in the industry that you're just saying, and you just happen to be put. I can tell by what you were saying that he's somebody that is potentially down to the homeless and is
Right, that makes sense.
and it was, I thought, and I went to text and I'm like, he's going to be amazing, because you have perfect personality for real estate stuff, because you need people, not only feel special, but you put her at ease. You took a very hard time in her money, and every transaction is for everybody, but every transaction is emotional. For buyers, it's emotional. For sellers, it's emotional. They're usually vegan homes, especially residential homes, if they've been in for long periods of time. And tensions can get very high when you're doing something that's so emotionally charged, and you just were able to use a perfect perspective on such things. And I look forward to bringing it. Right, I don't know, I'm gonna talk, and I'm gonna speak to them, and I'm gonna see everybody.
I did work twilight with the houses. So something that it was on Thursday. Set up there, and they see this. But. I find the Thursday one, I'm gonna try, twilight ones are good, we do them in. Confidence, because you do the sunset view, and you're doing something in having these time. I can play it good, no to do. Something demand by something paying, switch out.
All right, in about 3 minutes, Jeremy's gonna be starting his next class. So if anyone needs to grab water, use restroom, any of that, you get about 3 minutes. All this should be up on the YouTube channel soon as well, so you'll be able to watch the recording. Of course, you have a good one, guys. I'm not seeing it yet. We do need to. I see a record fix what I was hoping to with. No, yeah, no, it's all right. Tuesdays, she usually works out of the conference. So it's, I'm sure. Probably back in free email. Yeah, she'll probably want to hop on a phone call with you, mostly because she's not a tech person. So she prefers the phone. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, like I said, I only briefly looked at it. That was the big thing I noticed.
Is she about this concept? I mean, obviously the concept I want to use words like I and me instead of like us and like bar kind of thing. So I want to keep this, you know, not plural, but like one person.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to put anything in there that is going to imply that you are a team or anything like that. You, like I said, you want to make sure that the brokerage information is as prominent as possible.
Okay.
You usually also want to have something in there. You want to have accessibility features.
Okay.
So, but that's usually through whoever you're using to host.
Yeah, I need to get an IDX set up, so I'm trying to work on that, because right in the lesson, get an IDX set up, they wanted me to use a different type of provider. Because I didn't use theirs was like $60 a month or something, so I was trying to get that set up. And then obviously the balance up for listings and all. I know, like, I have a blog that's set up on it, but that's only got like 4 articles right now, most of it's just basically informational. But I'm sure that it probably will be a words or way from. Like in her, but
Yeah, I mean. And she'll have more knowledge on this than I will, but with informational stuff, it's always just. It's important to have something that clarifies that you are not advising anyone, like you are not acting as a lawyer, you're not acting like you are. This is real estate, but also you're not giving anyone real estate advice with your articles.
I mean, like, I could say something, some house quickly, you know what I mean, things to space, stage your home.
The legal stuff she'll have more, like she'll tell you what verbiage to look out for and things like that.
I mean, the URL is not anything, it's an issue or anything, just.
It shouldn't be.
Yeah, it was very simple. I did that for a reason, because I didn't want to like put like my name on it, because I didn't want to confuse things, I didn't know what else to put on there, so we're gonna purchase the domain, hoping that that was the right one months ago, but. Yeah, I'm just hoping, and then on colors, so I think it's consensus, they just said colors don't be too much.
No, we actually encourage people to use their own color palette and things like that, because we want the agent to be the one that's advertised. You know, obviously sticking within the parameters of the state, but the only other thing that I didn't look too specifically for, but it didn't jump out at me, was different accessibility features like, you know, text reader, you know. things that, you know, again, whoever is hosting the site, whoever built out the site, like, okay, yeah.
I built multiple websites before, not just, you know, what I mean, I built that on my own. But that's why I'm trying to say, like, I don't mind changing anything, you know what I mean, so the time I built it was like 3 or 4 months ago. So like, obviously, I didn't know too many of the guidelines at the time,
Yeah,
so it was just kind of like, there's a long process, and I just want to make sure that everything is supposed to.
yeah,
And
You
I
really
figured
just-
there's the issues.
yeah, you really just, as far as like the accessibility stuff, you just wanna make sure that anyone who goes on that site. Is able to use the site regardless of what, you know, if they might have vision difficulties. Like,
So larger text, I assume.
you know, or at least the ability to access larger text. There's like ways to, you know, embed for like images, like descriptions of what the image depicts, and for videos, something similar. You know, but again, that's something that maybe you'll probably elucidate a little more on again.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course.
All right. Why don't we get started? We can call this the group. I'm Jeremy Poley. I'm the director of media here. I never remember whether it's media director or director of media. Basically anything visual is something that I try to get behind and head up. Most importantly is the services that we offer. It's called My Philadelphia Photo. So it's a discounted service for any realtors with KW Philadelphia where we do the photos, video, things like that. But today, what I want to do is, I think I called it how to prep, pick, and present your property photos. But also AKA how to not have to hire me. And if you get really good with the tips that I give, maybe AKA how I can hire you to shoot photography. So the goal, of course, is like this thing right here is probably the most important tool on the planet at this point. As a realtor, it goes without saying, you do a lot from this, and your clients, your potential clients, potential buyers are all doing a lot with this as well. Like just broken down into two ways. Of course, it can be used to talk, to send messages, and that can be very important. The other way is visually, you get to look through and see things, things that actually represent reality. If anybody's ever written like a listing description, you know, it's one thing to write like, it's a beautiful day, the sun is shining on your beautiful balcony and blah, 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 and you kind of try and hype it up. You are creating an image in somebody's head, but of course, that's not truly what the property is. And that's where pictures, video, media come into play. You have the ability to actually show what is actually there, what the person might actually be buying. And that's about as deep as we're gonna get. It's a little bit deep, abstract versus real. But so to get started, we're gonna hit on 5 points today. The first one being responsibility. So there's plenty of pictures out there. Actually, I'll just jump right to one. I did a little work here in advance. This was the first one I pulled up, by the way. And I'm gonna use it a couple of times. I'm just gonna say it. This is not a good picture. Right here, that's not a good picture. So just by the end of this class, you will immediately know, you probably already know how to have an advantage over whoever this realtor is, who I haven't even looked yet. I really hope they're not in this room. If they are, or at the agency, I'm sorry, but we're gonna learn how you can already get ahead of people there who have a $465,000 property on the market. So whose responsibility is it for the property to be ready to look good, to be well presentable? Is it photographers, the realtors, the homeowners, or the cleaners? Everyone? I was thinking that is actually a good answer. So everybody has a role to play. And depending on the property, you know, maybe you don't have a cleaner. Sometimes depending on the property, you don't even have a homeowner really. But the responsibility, as far as like, again, back to abstract, the abstract the thought of responsibility, that truly does come down to the realtor. Now, at that point, it's up to the realtor to do their best job in, what's the right word, not abdicating. JP, help me out, you're good with words.
Delegating.
Was it?
Delegating.
Delegating, that's exactly what I was looking for.
I delegated to Davis.
So delegate. If you have the right cleaner, then that means that that's no longer your responsibility because you delegate it to somebody else. So of course, depending on what kind of property you have, there's a scale in which how thorough you want to be when doing these things. But the word responsibility, there's a little bit more to it. And as you mentioned, actually, let me go through real quick with names. Davis, is it?
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, I forget yours.
Ryan.
Ryan, Kelvin, Richard, Nair. All right. And I know I saw, I believe it's Cassie, it says Cassandra. I might be wrong on that. but kind of good to see you again, if not in person. So with responsibility, yes, there's a few things that can go into that. I mean, typically, again, if the responsibility falls to you, it doesn't mean that you have to be the one to go in, to clean everything, to set things up. But educating the homeowner, certainly on what they can do to have the property well presentable. And then down to the final check. It's very worthwhile to see the property before it's gonna be photographed. That can mean showing up at the same time as the photographer. That can mean showing up earlier in the day, just to make sure everything's on point for the day before, but having some sort of look where in your mind, you know what to expect from the photos that are gonna come back to you. Now, I'm gonna play a little video that points out a few things about how to prep the place. I don't wanna get too much into it. You'll get the idea, so it's not worth more than a minute or two of our time. This is a video that I made during the COVID shutdown. When you're sitting there, you're locked into your home, trying to figure out something that you can do for the agency. So this is a video, it's on our YouTube, KW Philadelphia's YouTube, on how to shoot with a mobile phone. And we're gonna watch portions of it here.
Maybe you're in a situation where a real estate photographer can't make their way over to you for one reason or another. And you still want to. And you want your pictures to look good. I'm gonna show you how you can get professional looking photos that look like this out of this. Your own phone.
I don't know if you think that's the best part.
I'll take you through 3 phases that will show you how you can use your own phone, and any phone, for the most part, can do to pull off some great looking photos. And if you hold on till the end, I'm gonna have a little bonus section for a little bit of a real estate photographer's secret that can really take your photos to a whole nother level. So dive in with me and let's get it done. The first thing that we need to do is get our place prepped. I'm not gonna go prepping tips. So there's a lot of resources online. I'm not gonna go too in depth, and really you can get as far as to look at this interior design things. But I think the biggest thing here is that there's things to avoid. So as opposed to things to really ramp up how it looks, that's for a different type of video. But we really want to avoid some things that are going to set people off in different ways. That's kind of extreme wording. We're going to start in the kitchen. First culprit in the kitchen is going to be a trash. Chances are it's freestanding, it's taking up space. Go ahead and either move it to a place where it tucks in nicely or get it out of there. Next thing, surfaces. If you have things on your countertops, get them out of there. They're taking up all the space. Last thing, I've seen this way too many times. Get rid of those dishes in the sink. The #1 crime in any photo shoot is toilet seats up. Close those toilet seats. Also, bathroom sinks. We tend to have too much stuff on there. If there's toothbrushes down, get those off. And honestly, if like soap, things like that, you might want to remove those too. Also, let's go ahead and show what's behind the shower curtain, shall we? It doesn't have to be all the way open. That can look kind of weird too. And in this situation, the shower is actually, the head is on the other side, but we've got this nice looking plant. I've got a good angle, so I'm kind of being my own criminal here and taking a picture that's not showing the shower head. We really want to show the shower head. This is just such a nice picture. I had to go with it. Bedrooms, and to a certain degree, living rooms. You might have made a bed and it looks nice for the first time in a long time. But you want to make sure that you're not seeing a lot of lines on those sheets as well. Make sure that's all as straightened out as possible. Sometimes you can come to the degree of using a different type of sheet. Next thing, wires. We shouldn't be seeing wires. That's not a nice looking thing. And also, pump those pillows.
All right. I'm gonna minimize that, stop that at a weird time. So there's a few kind of principles that can go into what you can do to get a place ready. I tried to come up with an acronym, so it's CPR. If negative connotation there, clean, present, and remove. I realize this is a big stretch in some of the use of these words, but so the idea of clean is probably pretty straightforward. If you have, well, just consider the opposite, dirty. If there's dirt around, that can be in a number of ways. Even ceiling fans are bad culprits of like hanging things of dirt if there hasn't been somebody living there for a while. Just making sure that place is clean. Presentable is something a little bit different. So that's more into what I was talking about here with like sheets on a bed. It was a 10-year-old kid who just made their bed because they knew that their parents said they were going to have pictures taken, and it's like sloppy and doesn't look nice. You can go an extra effort to actually make these things look nice. Another thing is blinds, actually. That comes up a lot. This is also an opportunity for me to like get some things off my chest as a real estate photographer. So blinds is something where there's a number of ways you can go about it. A lot of this is subjective. There are blinds that are super expensive and they're a selling feature. And so it's important for the photographer to make sure that they're getting pictures of these really expensive blinds that are down. But like the electric ones that are cloth that like go up and down, that can be a useful selling point. At the same time, having a good view, not that this is the best view in the world right here, but this is a feature of the room. If this room were to be listed, we would want to make sure that we see everything. And so if there were blinds here that were obscuring the vision, that's something that we should take care of. So that's something to take into account. Again, back to responsibility, it would be nice if the photographer was aware of these things and kind of worked with it to give you the best result. But to a certain degree, there's that point between, well, where does the responsibility lie? And just making sure that you're doing it. It's great if you have a photographer and you know that they can do this all the time, but all those little things, make sure you're getting done. So clean, present, and then remove would be another step. This is like if you were the countertops. That was one thing I talked about. In your kitchen, some kitchens have like, they went crazy on Amazon Day and they have every single like espresso machine, grinder, this, that. And before you know it, you can't see anything at all on the counter. It's all filled up with stuff. So just making sure that you are being more minimal and removing things. That is a good way of getting the most out of your property. And one other point, actually, so it got a little more complicated than CPR. There's two other things. Move. If you want to go an extra step and be there with the photographer, sometimes there's things in the way. So there might be like a perfect shot. We already talked about what a great view that is. And maybe a photographer's here and the way that like things are set up, there's a chair right here that takes up all of this floor space. Being aware of that and working with the photographer to move things out of the way so that they're getting the best angle possible, as well as sometimes there's just like boxes that can get really complicated when the homeowner isn't able to clear things out too well. And the best way to get pictures out of that is to go with them room to room with the photographer, and you might wind up moving a stack of boxes or a Peloton bike or something like that to another room so that you can get the best view of the room. So CPRMU. Where's that? Hip remove is the acronym, actually. So if you do have some nice properties, upgrades is something that you could look into. I just shot a property where they had me reshoot it because they had like a nice backyard. It's in like Queen Village. And they turned the backyard into a parking spot. And they built an entire like wooden gate behind it. And they have this like private little lane behind the house. And so it was a great addition, and they're able to increase their price. And that's something that you as a realtor, if you grow your knowledge into different things that a homeowner can do to increase the value of their home, you can go into it and you can say, hey, you can upgrade this, you can upgrade that. So we went over responsibility, we went over CPR, which became a much harder acronym, quality control. So now we're starting to get into, we've covered how to prep for a place. Now we're getting into how do we get the most out of that? What kind of pictures are we getting? So for starters, wide angle is always useful. HDR, I don't know if anybody's heard of that. It's a style of photography where, well, I'll just play that part of the video. If I can find it.
This is gonna take your pictures up. If you follow all the rules that I told, it gets you maybe 50% of the way there. This is gonna get you that other 50%. And it's true HDR. So HDR, the concept is that you take a picture, you can combine multiple pictures, one of a low exposure where you don't have much light in there. One of a high exposure where you have a ton of light in there. And then one at the more natural medium exposure. So what you're gonna need to do this right is to have a tripod and one of those cell phone, kind of over here a second ago, one of those cell phone holders that can screw into the tripod. Because all your pictures have to be to the exact same point with the non-HDR pictures.
So I just want to show an example now.
So you'll see at the end.
I talk too much.
The pictures, my final product, those were each based on me taking a low, a high, and a medium. So here you go. These are the pictures that I took. This was including editing. So you want to make sure that if you follow all those tips that I've said, that puts you in a position to then have your pictures be edited and enhanced even further. But even if you don't do any editing, I know you're gonna end up with way better pictures.
Okay, so it's a little extreme if you're taking your own photos on your cell phone to ask for you to have like a tripod and go do that. But it's still a good example of what the HDR technology, the process does for photos. So we do this with our cameras when we go through the shoot. And so to show a few examples here.
Did we download an HDR app and then layer 3 pictures on each other or what?
So a lot of phones have, that's a good question. A lot of phones have like an HDR option.
Right, my phone's got a button, but then were you comparing the digital one that's the button versus if you just layer it or something?
Exactly, yep. So in the phone, it's not true HDR.
Right.
It's a process that they use that gets the image close to HDR. So it's definitely an upgrade over like a normal photo. But yeah, it's still kind of lacking. I'll show in a little more detail actually right here, the difference. So this is one we just did this weekend. This is a basic photo. This is our basic photo service. It's not HDR, but you can see how you have a very wide view of the room. This is technically a professional picture. We're at a good height. We see it's rather presentable. I mean, there are maybe a few things that I would like to have seen done. Go ahead.
Quick question, did you ASM to take the photo down, or did they just have the photo already over it? Like, is it too much stuff?
Yeah.
The wall, is that like kind of feeling or?
That was that. No, I wouldn't have even applied it in frame. There's just there's like so much. This house was a ton of the whole moving things around.
Right.
The realtor was there. She was a single mom. It was and she had a ton of stuff. So it was a situation where we wanted to get the best out of the shoot. But there's some things that either she didn't want touched, that were, personal to her, things like that.
Did you recommend taking stuff off the wall, or they have like crazy amount of stuff?
Yeah, there can be a few different reasons why. So sometimes big images of people's faces, personal faces can be a problem. At the same time, sometimes. There's things that people going through photos could find. Offensive, but maybe not even offensive, just like, you know. An American flag somewhere, I don't know how to go too deep into it, but you get the point. There can be things that you might want just to right. So this is a basic, and this will really show you the difference. This is HDR. Actually, I was wishing that I had a better example, but you can see in the windows. I wonder if I can see. Doesn't look like it. So you can see a much clearer view in the windows. Something else that's going on is the shadows. There's a lot more detail in it. So shadow under here, even over here on the floor. And then the bright spots, there's more detail on that too. Normally, in that last photo, that the light comes in and not only destroys the view out the window, but it really starts to wreck like any white wall around it. Like all of that, all of the ceiling, all of that's gone. These dark spots, you can't really see anything there. It's too kind of contrasty. There's not enough detail in the shadows and the highlights. So you're gonna get better views and the light is gonna look more natural going from the dark to the light areas.
So the HDR is a program you can use for your computer.
It's a process. Yeah, so what we do it as a process, and there's like different things you can automate. Like if you have.
I didn't even see the option on the phone.
Yeah, and so as Davis kind of pointed out, the example in the video that I showed is actually me using the HDR that my phone offered, which wasn't real. So then what I did was I did the true process, which was I took 3 pictures and I set them at low exposure, medium exposure, high exposure, and then went into editing and put them together. That's where the reason why it's a bonus on the video is because you as a realtor, if you're just taking photos with your phone, that might be a step too far. And if you do want to do it, if you want to take those photos, we can edit them for like a really cheap cost. But I'm trying to do as much as I can to show you, A, how you can do this on your own and save some money. B, how you can train your eye to know what good photography is when you start working with photographers.
What type of phone did you say that you're using?
Yeah, this is a Pixel.
Google?
Yeah,
I heard they're good.
Pixel 3 or something like that. I mean, most phones these days are all really good.
Yeah, but I heard that pretty good picture.
Yeah, it was when it came out, it was like the one to get. That's not why I got the phone.
Okay.
And I really think you can get, there's not much of a difference between what I could take on this, and I'm sure I could take anybody else's phone in the room. So I wouldn't say, wouldn't want anybody to hold back from using their phone just because they don't have the latest and greatest.
Got another question, may take it away.
Yeah.
Is there a limit to the amount of pictures?
That is one of the biggest questions. I think I actually want to hold off. That's a really significant point. If you take anything away from today, that's going to be one of the biggest ones. So let's hold off on that one. Very good question.
Question.
Mhm.
Stay, sort of who's responsible for saving the house and all that. For the rental properties, when you list that.
Yeah,
What's the difference between what you're gonna show for the rental, what you're gonna show for the seller house? Are you the same type of pictures you're looking for online?
yeah. The ideal pictures are usually ones with minimal design that makes a room look lived in and nice. Without being too stylized one way or another. It's a lot easier to do when it's a homeowner who has a $500,000 house and it's one of the biggest transactions of their life, so they actually care about it. As another one, it's a renter and they don't really care, they just leased it for a year and now they're being pushed out or something like that.
And the biggest debates, when I have a rental, rentals, and my son, who's aggressive, he's in, he's got a license for it. But he does, he stole it. But an influence on my decisions. I wanted to buy drapes for the house for the rental.
Got it.
I got a pig next door,
Uh-huh.
and I don't know. I got a nice black cat.
Right,
Graders.
yep,
He says, why invest it on a rental? He doesn't know my purpose. I said, well, I'll take them down if I figure, or else we go good, or they could purchase more graders.
mhm,
So
yeah.
what would you decide? Sure, but
It comes down to money, right? I want to know what the numbers were. Are we talking about something where I'm getting $700 back a month, or are we talking about something like it's getting me $2,700 back? And I'm not even in the position to own something like that in the first place, so, it's subjective. You bring up a good point. Those are questions you have to ask yourself in the end, to what degree do you want to go? But one thing that you pointed out is, Richard mentioned that, for Cassie watching, that, there was a neighbor who lived like a pig, and we didn't want to see that in the pictures. Sometimes actually, there's a benefit to the basic photos. I recommend to people to not get HDR when they come to us. If it's in a neighborhood where they don't want you to maybe see the neighbors, where that could ruin your picture. So something like this, we have no idea where this is. Maybe you make out these are trees, but that really could be anything. This could be literally like right in the middle of the worst neighborhood in Philadelphia, and you wouldn't know it. Whereas if we went with HDR, if you spent extra money, where you went through the extra hard work to get HDR done yourself, if you see these windows and you see that you are in the worst neighborhood in Philadelphia, then, you know, as Richard kind of pointed out, that can take away from your ability to sell or rent. So moving on, horizontal or vertical. So back to this. There's nothing wrong with vertical pictures. They can be useful. The problem is the different listing websites and the MLS and how they show them. So this is something to take into consideration. I will say this is also subjective too, so you can decide if you want to do what this person did. But we can see here how this looks all kind of blocky and weird. Yeah. There's a lot wrong with that picture, but even this one, which makes sense, it's this skinny little doorway that they want to feature, but it doesn't look good as a vertical picture in Zillow, same in MLS. So it's up to you as far as whether there's enough value in taking a vertical picture that winds up looking like that, as opposed to a horizontal one that might be a little bit harder, where maybe you see a little bit less, but looks more seamless as people are looking through it.
Wait, will you tell us what's wrong with that first picture, other than the fact that it's vertical, like, what do you hate about it?
Yeah, you're right. I keep beating it up without talking about why that's not really fair. I want to, we're going right into it. Okay, so a few things about it. From our perspective, this house looks like it's gonna tip over to the right. It has the wrong vertical axis, so they're bending back, which obscures it and makes it look smaller at the top, larger at the bottom, and they're turning it, which gives it that tilt. This does not feel like a good picture in any way, shape, or form. And since it's show you,
What if you struggle to get the top of the house from a sideways angle photo?
yeah, sometimes,
I mean, does it matter if you're leaving it off the top of the house, because they're destroying the photo?
so they can be useful as a second photo, is to get one that is closer up. Sometimes you can have all the room in the world, and you still want that second photo with it cut off and to get it. But it is really nice to get as much of the building in it as possible. But let me just show you. Yeah, so it's just, it turns into a standard. So when you look through Zillow or you look through whatever site, MLS, you see photos like these and it almost becomes like a standard. Just like the way that you maybe say a word in the community that you're raised in, it becomes an actual like kind of unspoken rule. And there's a natural, again, not to get too deep into things, but there's a natural comfort that we feel when we see something that measures up to how we perceive things in reality.
Sometimes, I notice, when I'm searching on the list, sometimes the way that you can take like something like that, I would assume the middle ones with the other property.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's very confusing, because I know I went to do, an open house,
Mhm.
and I had a picture, I went right up to the wrong house.
Yep. Yeah.
You know, they didn't have a sign getting out.
Uh-huh.
It's like, the person who put the open house out, it was, but
Right.
it all worked out, but what I'm trying to think is, it is hard to photograph the row house or downhouse.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. So something else that you can do as a realtor. Exactly, that's exactly what I was gonna say, is you don't have to,
I don't know do that, but I was thinking like that would make more sense.
Yeah.
It would make more sense for the person, it's almost misleading, they don't know which house they're.
right, yeah, I think. Pretty much every phone should have like an image gallery or something that you can go in and comment. Yeah, or like YouTube is the answer for everything, just you go to YouTube and search how to crop a photo in my phone, something like that. Yeah, so it could be more useful. You might not want to accept this picture and you feel like maybe it wasn't as well centered. Sometimes that happens.
Yeah.
And you can, yeah, go ahead and crop it some, so that you can let people know exactly what it is. And then this is where it comes into play, adding more photos for context. So. You mentioned like the cutoff photo, so that this is one where it was worth it to get closer. You get to see the sidewalk there is, of course, beautiful, 100 years old. You get to see more detail in the door and things like that. So it's actually a really useful picture to have on top of the one that shows the entire house. Yeah, and then,
So that first one and then to that second one.
yeah. So from there,
So I mean, getting across the street seems like probably the best option, we're in the middle of the street, maybe just to get the full
right.
house and photo.
Yeah, sometimes you're not able to. I wish I was able to just like immediately go to the pictures that I know are a good example of what you're talking about. This street actually was pretty, like, not the biggest, so I'm literally up against the house on the other side of the street, leaning against it. But sometimes it's even shorter, and you just cannot get a photo like that. And it's okay if you have to kind of move over a little bit.
Some of the 3 stories, and that's a odd style, some of the 3 stories are very.
Yeah, yep.
No photo.
So getting an angle, now this one's kind of meant for different purposes, meant to show the street and the neighborhood. But if you have to move some so that you can still get a straight kind of vertical, that helps quite a bit. And then, you know, back to the one I was being up on. It feels like the Titanic sinking or something like that. Yeah. And now, maybe this might seem like nitpicking, but this is exactly where that margin is, where there's some realtors who have a $465,000 listing who are not going to sell as well as you are. And it's that margin. Where can you find the margins that make you a better presenter of properties than the competition out there? So, a lot of the questions here have been going into the techniques. We talked about vertical lines, we talked about fitting things in, and so I'm gonna go back to the video for a short little segment. How much time we have? I'm gonna just, camera settings are one thing. So if we are talking about using your phone to shoot, my phone that I had in here, it was my last phone. It had an option for, it had JPEG as a setting that you could use to shoot, and then it had JPEG and RAW. And anytime you see the ability to have RAW selected, you want to do that on your phone, because when you edit the photos, I wish there's a good illustration for this. It gives you much more room. It takes in a lot more information, so that when you go in to tweak it, to like brighten the shadows and to darken the highlights. Well, just in any picture. So back to this one. There we go. So if you took a normal JPEG of this. There's just not as much data in the phone. And when you try to like darken this, because it was really bright, you got the sun shining, you try to darken it so you can see the view more. And then when you try to brighten this area, it just right, it just doesn't have enough information. But if it's a raw file, those are like sometimes 10 times bigger, and there's just a ton of data in there. So when you start manipulating these things, turning those knobs, there's just a lot more information that you get to retrieve from it. So that might be a little too deep to get into that, but the point being, if you are shooting with your phone, try and find the setting that says, you know, raw, maybe like high quality or something like that. And you'll be taking the best pictures and you'll be able to adjust them to look the best. Yeah,
I have this old.
Super big phone. Yeah,
And this thing is horrible, but I was thinking of that.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, they really are just big phones.
Here.
Mhm. And it'll give you a bigger viewing space as you're walking around. That's a totally fine solution. There we go.
So at this point, you're probably taking some pretty good looking pictures with your phone. At this point, I would probably just cut you loose and have you shoot a place and pull out some professional looking picture. But I want to give you some tips on exactly how to take those pictures that are probably at a professional level and raise them up a notch. So we're going to look at 3 composition tips. Our first composition tip is going to have to do with seeing walls. So if you only see one wall in your picture, it's probably some sort of detail shot. Imagine maybe a piece of furniture with the wall behind it. And that's not going to really reveal too much about the room, which again is what people are buying. Likewise, with 2 walls, you're probably really putting the focus on something. The place I was going to do that is kitchens to highlight 2 countertops and all the appliances. But if you can find a 3rd wall to get in your picture, that's going to be, you're going to be up against one wall, just barely getting it in your picture. And then of course the wall in the back. And then you're opening your camera up, your view up to the 3rd wall on the opposite side that you're positioned from. The natural desire might be to find like those 2 windows and match that up. And that's not necessarily a bad picture, but in real estate, we are selling the entire floor space. So we want to find usually as many walls as we can, and then when we open it up to 3, now we're getting that 3rd wall, that's going to give us more dimension to see what we're looking for. And that's going to actually give you the depth perception that you as a human is used to having to understand the layout of the room, the depth of the room. I mean, you can stop right now and just look straight forward, and you can probably see 3 walls where you're standing at. Assuming you're in a house or a building, you're going to see 3 walls, and that helps you to see the depth and to understand the relationship of different parts of the room. That's where real estate photography really starts to stand apart from other types of photography. We're going for recreating the space to a person, as opposed to capturing the beauty of a moment. Sorry to sell out on beauty, but there's no room for that here. No, you can find beauty, but that's not the right way. So our next composition tip is going to be lines of sight. Take for example, in our bedroom, we've got a nice looking shot here, but there's a plant in the way down here in the corner. Now, at first glance, you might think, oh, that maybe has some dimension to it or something like that. But again, that's not what we're going for here. So by moving that thing out of the way, we're going to open up the entire area around for that bed, meaning the side, the other side of the bed, and allow the viewer to gain a much better understanding of the room, as opposed to having like maybe a cool looking picture because it has some board around the bed there. So when you find a good position in your room, maybe 3.
So in my mind, when I did this, I don't know how to go back. I can't find it. I was like, this is a great example. There's a plant there, and then I moved the plant and my dresser's there covering up the exact spot I was hoping to kind of open up anyway. So don't let the dresser kind of ruin the point. The point is,
The viewer to gain a much better understanding of
the point is, if you're able to move that, that should open things up. Yeah, that wound up being such a bad example, but I wasn't about to move the dresser just to do this
as
job.
opposed to having like maybe a cool looking picture because it has some foreground better. So when you find a good position in your room, you put on a first tip with maybe 3 walls in it. And it's really displays the room well. Go ahead and make sure that you're getting a line of sight. If you see something in your way, do your best so you can get it out. Our last composition tip is, I just looked at it, subjects. Okay. Subjects is what I'm saying. We've all
There's a certain madness that sets in when you've been stuck in a home for 3 weeks.
already touched on how real estate photography is different, has a different purpose and priority than most other types of photography. And it doesn't come up any stronger than in what your subject is in your picture. So for example, we've got some beautiful light coming in, we've got this nice kind of stove top. We can put a little foregrounding with a refrigerator and get a lovely tea kettle there. And before you know it, we've got this beautiful shot. And it's a beautiful shot. It's absolutely meaningless to a person who's actually really looking to understand the real estate property and what they might be interested in buying. So you're actually in some ways wasting somebody's time by looking for these beautiful photographic shots that are on the wrong subject. But what we really want to do is show the kitchen for the most part. Every once in a while, there's a reason for me to get like a little shot of really nice appliance, that's a selling point, but that's not what we're doing in that last shot. We were just showing how like this can be, and there's no room right there. So being able to come in here and get the wider scope of the kitchen, maybe include the refrigerator as well, just by taking a few steps back and placing the subjects on the room. In the picture I went for the kitchen, it was a little challenging to fit everything in. We have appliances on both sides. We have the countertops on both sides. We've got a big refrigerator. It's a lot to ask for a camera phone to be able to capture that entire view. But by balancing some things out and taking that step back, we are able to see the natural elements that the kitchen has to offer, and that's the subject.
I will stop the video there. So just to go over the few points there, working backwards, actually. When you get photos back, or if you're taking photos, making sure that every room is established is a really good word. That you have a view. The whole point of that kitchen example that I made was that we had a shot that established what the kitchen looked like, what it would feel like to be able to be in there, as opposed to the picture of like the cool tea kettle on the stove or something like that. Now, you can potentially use pictures like that. You can kind of sprinkle those in a little bit, but you want to have, again, established the kitchen already with a good picture so that somebody understands what it's like. Again, these are people buying a house. They want to know the dimensions, they want to know things like that. So that's very important. One thing I actually skipped over was height, camera height. So especially if you're shooting with your phone, it's pretty natural to hold your phone up and you'll want to go like this and take pictures like this. But the reality is, might be worth it. I think I have it there. Yeah, right here. Here, actually, let me draw it. That'll make more sense. So. Not very good at drawing. So this is an empty room. So this is gonna be the floor. This is gonna be the ceiling. Now, where I put this, you wind up with kind of like a square there, where the floor ends and where the ceiling begins. It's important to either have it perfectly centered or to leave more room on the floor. And when you shoot with your phone up here, you wind up having less floor and more ceiling. So it winds up looking like. See if I can do this. This is pretty awful, but I hope it's going further. I mean, hopefully, yeah, I think that kind of works. We can see here that we're actually not seeing much space of the floor, and it's kind of messing with our depth perception. Whereas in this one, I mean, floor is literally, it's called square footage, like it's the floor. That's what people are buying, is how much floor do I get? It's not how much ceiling do I get. And so what you want to do is, rather than take pictures from up here that wind up looking like this with a short floor and a huge ceiling, get a little bit lower. We do this with our cameras or with our phones if we're using phones. And that will give you more floor and less ceiling. So camera height, establishing the room with a wide shot, and what was the other one? And horizontal. Yeah. So those three things will get you really far when you're taking your own pictures. And then to wrap up, just going over the different types of photos and videos and media that you might want to use. If you have a $150,000 investment property, or if you have a $1.5 million property, there might be different choices that you want to make in order to advertise it and present it. And so we'll look at some of those. So this was an extra shoot that we did. These are detail shots or vignettes. This is what I talked about with you need establishing shots. So we went through, we shot the entire house. It had nice establishing shots. It still wasn't selling. And so we wanted to go through again and kind of feature some of the things that maybe get lost. Like that. See how like that's out of focus. This does really nothing to actually show what the kitchen has to offer. It just kind of creates the same beautiful moment that I dogged on in the video. But that can be one more thing to help. Yes and no. So I always try and look at, I see which direction the house is facing. And then I usually try to time the shoot so that it's facing the sun. So if it's facing east, take a morning shoot. If it's facing the west, take an afternoon shoot.
Back to sun. You're aiming for direct sunlight.
So that's why I said kind of. Usually I am. Just as like a spotlight on the house.
Right.
Sometimes you can do it the other way and get like a cool effect. Again, I wish I like knew off the top of my head to show you where it almost kind of enshrouds the house in this rim of light because the sun is behind it. But you you do wind up the house, the front face will be more in shadow, and the different features of it will be more diminished, less pronounced.
Yeah, the outside, but I know, the photographer that we used for apartment, he was always trying to, he called it the blue hour.
Oh,
I was obsessed with it.
yeah, like 6 p.m. or depending on time of day. Well, let's jump. The next one is twilight. So it's not so much blue hour, but it's about the same. You're going for the same thing. Or is this aerial? I think I was just showing both. Yeah, so it's a way to, you don't want to have your entire shoot be during blue hour, which is, again, it's like right before, or is it right after twilight? You don't want your entire shoot.
Doesn't get that shadow.
Right. Right. But it's a great way to make your listing pop out, especially for like the cover image, that one image that you can get.
The outside of the pool.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, whatever it has to offer. There's a natural beauty. You have purples, blues, yellows. It really kind of pops out. Something else that you can also kind of do, so this is Blue Hour. You can do interior. I feel that there's less that you get out of that, but you can still do it. Again, these are vignettes, so you can see there's intentionally things are out of focus. That is not a good way to display a property on its own. This is just something that should barely be sprinkled in.
That is the gallery.
Yes, exactly. A way to kind of change it up. Virtual staging. So this property, believe it or not, is that's not real. This was an empty building. And we went in with virtual staging and added these things to it. That goes back to what we were talking about earlier. The ideal way to kind of show a house is to try and make it less stylistic and rather minimal. It's a good way to take an empty house and the photos of it and take it up a notch. Even the exterior, none of those plants were there. That was all added.
How much does it cost to get someone to digitally stage their home?
So we do it for, it's $45 per photo. And then, yeah, and then every agent here gets 25% off. So, you know, that winds up being, I don't know, 35, something like that.
Okay.
And there are different levels. So there are some that, I mean, kind of just like any service, you can go with one where they're like, hey, we'll do 20 photos for $50. And then it winds up looking like, you know, a kid drew something on it or something like that. But sometimes that's, again, it comes down to money. Does it work out? Videos with aerial. This is actually a property website that you can do. So you see out here, this is riverside8.com. So he just bought a domain name and then we made an easy website with everything. You can post this on Facebook. You can write it on literature that you pass out. And then 3D tours where you can look through the house. This is, sometimes you might get a listing where it hasn't even been built yet and all you have are plans. These are digitally created images. This house did not exist. We also did a video. So just know that if you have a client who's got a big investment, you can do things like this. Again, this did not exist. This is all digitally created. And then biography videos, if you ever want to highlight yourself. It's not just necessarily the property, but yourself as well. So I think we are out of time. Any quick questions, or if there's a lot, then maybe shoot an email. Yep.
For the first part, would you recommend us to take off the right vacation and take back the right on the wall?
Oh, yeah. You're talking about right there, that one?
Vacation.
Oh, the kitchen. Sorry, which property was that? This one?
Yeah, this.
And what was the question? So we're in the kitchen.
There's one that has a knife on the wall.
A knife?
Like,
Is that all the gallery kitchen? Like a straight from, I think it's the video from the first tower show. I had to use the natural sunlight to take a photo. of the stuff.
Oh.
Knife when we put through the magnet.
Oh, in the video, right?
But yeah, that's
This is my place over there.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're saying, would I take that down?
yeah.
I don't think so. It's totally up to you. So if I did redo it, I'd align them better. Because it looks like there's one missing. But to me, that's really kind of cool. But that's me. So if I was a realtor, this is a way that I think I would like to show a house. But for you, that might be one of those things where maybe it's crossing the line somewhere. And you want to take it down. It's not taking up counter space. That's usually the big no-no. Is if this was maybe like a block of knives and it was a big one, that's taking up counter space, and that might be worth tucking under. Yeah. Well, my email is media@kwphiladelphia.com. So if you have any questions or anything, always feel free to shoot that over. And I actually don't know what to do from here. I got that in mind.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Yeah, you bet.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Thanks, guys. You.
Alright, Joe, we're gonna put for PC class here. Let's get the turns over.
You're self-sufficient.
I try to be.